I still remember those days when working in my agency felt like I was herding cats. I had this team and projects were moving along, they were moving forward, but it took constant pressure on the team to make sure that they were staying in their lane, that they were doing as they were told. And to be honest, it felt like it was very, very overwhelming, and it wasn't the fun business that I set out to build in the first place. So instead of micromanaging or having to micromanage, instead of doing all the work myself, I wanted to have the team execute. I didn't want to micromanage, and there is a way out of this, of course, but it has to be a consistent effort, and it has to be strategic effort on the business owner's side. It's not the responsibility of the team, it's the responsibility of the business owner. And in this video, I want to show you how I went from having a team of 5 with 30 clients to having a team of 5 with 90 clients in a smoothly working agency. Day to day was fun again. And that is what's most important, right? We're not building these agencies to make ourselves miserable and to just earn a lot of money. Of course, money is a nice byproduct. But what good is a profitable business if you're not enjoying the day-to-day work? I am Jan Koch. I'm the CEO of Virtual Summit Mastery. I run virtual events for a living. You may have seen me on the WP Agency Summit. And now I'm excited to talk about how I use standard operating procedures in my business to streamline what we were doing, to streamline the processes that my team was executing, and to go from being completely overwhelmed, like work was right here, right about the frame, to being able to manage all the projects smoothly, to being in a position of control, frankly, to being in the spot where I knew there would always be some minor fires, there would always be some things that were pressing, but I knew that in the big picture of things, everything was going smoothly. Now, what are the reasons you should think about standard operating procedures, especially as a WordPress agency owner, as a digital agency owner? Number one is things take too long if you don't standardize them. You have very, very similar processes being repeated day in and day out. And if you don't standardize them and if you don't enforce those standards on your team, everybody's doing them slightly differently. And maybe even from person to person, the same person is doing them differently depending on the day of the week. Maybe Mondays they feel like using this WordPress plugin. On Friday they might use this complete different plugin. You are just wasting time because there's no standardized learning curve. Everybody is starting from scratch at some point. And you want to make sure that when they learn the process, they learn it once and they can apply it over and over again. And you're not building a WordPress form on a WordPress website with one plugin and then the other day you decide, okay, let's try this new plugin that just came out, and you have to learn the entire plugin from scratch, or your team rather has to. You want to make things go as smooth as possible and as efficient as possible. Reason number 2 is the maintenance becomes a lot easier. The more websites you build, the less you want to reduce the complexity. For your maintenance efforts, that is key. And by having a standard operating procedure, this is how we build a form. This is how we build a WordPress shop. This is how we build a contact page. This is the page builder we use. And this goes way beyond WordPress plugins. By the way, those are just one example, but they are an important one because if you reduce the complexity on the websites you build, you reduce the cost of maintaining them, which makes your maintenance service more profitable and increases what sticks at the end. So the revenue stays the same, the costs go down, you bank more profit. Reason number 3 is your team is not wasting time learning new tools. If you have the same form plugin, for example, and you use it or your team uses it over and over and over and over again, you become more proficient in it and you can build more and more complex forms with it. And then when somebody joins the team as a new developer, for example, we're going into reason number 4 here, you can scale the team. If you don't have standardized processes, if you don't have SOPs, standard operating procedures in place, you cannot scale because it's not easy to onboard a new team member. If you have them, it is super easy to onboard a new team member. Given that they have the technical skills and given that they have the emotional skills that you want in your agency, you point them to the folder with the standard operating procedures, and as they go into the projects, they know where to look for what to do and how to do it. That's the key. You cannot scale if you don't have the processes defined and if you don't know that everybody on the team is doing the same task in the same fashion in every single project. Now, how do we go about this? I mean, nobody likes documenting, right? We all have enough on our plates. Why should we take the time to also describe what we're doing and how we're doing it and why we're doing it the way we're doing it? That just adds more workload to our plates, right? And this is just partially right. Bear with me here for a second. Because yes, you have to document. You have an additional workload, but you only have it one time. You only have it once. And the best way I personally go about this is I just screen record what I'm doing as I'm building a new Summit website, for example. I record my screen. I explain in detail every single step that I'm doing. And then I give it over to the team member who's building the next Summit website. And they can execute exactly the way I have been doing it. They can execute the exact same process just based on that video. Now, if you want to take this one step further, you have them transcribe the video and add screenshots to it. But I'm not a big fan of that because as soon as a plugin update comes out, for example, and the interface changes, you have to update the screenshots and you have to update the description maybe because naming changes on certain fields or buttons or something. And that's just a pain, to be honest. So what we do is we have a way that we record the videos, we upload them into a system that lets us tag the videos based on what is described, the process that is described. And then if something changes, anybody in the team is available to just record a new video. If they're working with that plugin right now, to stick with this example, they just record a new video, replace the old one. That is, for us, a super effective process. Step number 2, what you have to be aware of, there are various types of standard operating procedures. The second type that you need, besides those development SOPs that I've talked about in the beginning, is communication SOPs. And this is something that is often overlooked and that I wouldn't also recommend to do in video. I would do them in written form. But communication SOPs are super, super helpful. If there was one thing that I wish I would have done earlier in my agency, it is having those communication SOPs because they avoid misunderstandings. They make sure that when you have a new client come in, for example, everybody's on the same page. We use the same word for the same terms every single time. A website is a website, a shop is a shop, payment gateway is a payment gateway. Nobody has to ask if it's PayPal or Stripe or something like that. We know that a payment gateway for us might mean it's WooCommerce, it's Cardflows, it's Thrivecart. Whatever you define a term with, have that in your communication SOPs. Also, when it comes to communication, make sure that the team members know how to communicate. Which channel do you prefer? Do you prefer Slack? Do you prefer Signal? Do you prefer email? God forbid, telephone. Be very, very mindful with those communication SOPs and include the most detailed things. For example, when you are talking about Slack communication or text messaging communication, when is it okay to send a Slack message and when is it not okay to send a Slack message? How quickly should you expect an answer during office hours and then in the off time, of course? Can you send your team members a Slack message in the off time when they are not working? Is it okay? Because maybe your team is distributed across the globe and you have different time zones. Maybe somebody is dedicated to the maintenance of your client websites. Can you text them when you see a client website going down? Or should you text the CEO in your agency? Those are things that need to be defined in your communication SOPs. Super, super important so that everybody knows what they can do and what they cannot do in your agency. Now, to take this one step further, we've always talked about internal communication right now. You can also have external communication and you need SOPs for that. How do you communicate with a client? How do you start an email? How do you end an email? For which questions is it okay to book a call with a client? For which topics is it actually mandatory to book a call with a client? Those are also things that you want to set so that everybody who's public facing in your agency, be it directly in client contact for managing projects, be it a content marketer who's publishing on Facebook under your brand name, maybe your blogger, they need to know what to write about, how to write about, and how the messaging for the agency is. And that goes into the public facing communication SOPs. Now, I want to talk about 2 more and then I'll stop bugging you with this, but those 2 are really, really important. And I think if you have that set of SOPs in your agency, you are off to a really, really good start. Now, what I want to talk about is invoicing SOPs. And this is more for the business owner, maybe for the accountant side in your business, but it is super important. How do you charge your projects Do you have a 30% upfront fee? Do you have a 50% or even 100% upfront fee? I've seen agencies take a fixed amount, let's say $5,000 upfront for a website, and then charge a retainer for 2 years. And that is amazing for recurring revenue. It's really, really smart, but you need to be aware of what you're doing with your invoicing strategy. And you want to have an SOP in place so that people you trust can send invoices without you having to be the bottleneck in this case. Because if you get sick and if you physically cannot send an invoice, nobody knows how to do it. That's putting your business at risk. I mean, if you get run over by a bus, hopefully it doesn't happen, but if that happens, who's continuing the business? What's happening in that situation? Those are things that you need to consider, and invoicing SOPs are one of the ways to do that. The other type of SOPs I wanted to talk about is just general business stuff. It ties into that example of when you get hit by a bus as the agency owner. You need to have the most important processes defined. And most of us are guilty of that. I'm guilty of that myself for the first few years in my agency. I didn't have that. Even when I was a freelancer, when I was a one-man show, I didn't have those processes defined. And then at some point I thought, well, I have a wife, I have a daughter. If they don't know how my business operates, and I cannot answer their questions, how are they going to manage a situation when something bad happens to me and they need to take over the business? And that for me was the turning point when I said, okay, I need to step up. I need to make sure that I have the processes in place and documented so that anybody can at least communicate with clients, communicate with all the license holders that I'm paying every single month, all the service providers and stuff like that. So that the most fundamental things in business to keep the business running, maybe bring on a new CEO or to dissolve the company completely, that needs to be covered in your SOPs. And of course, you want to layer who has access to which level of SOPs. But if you have these 5 types of SOPs down, then you go from herding cats to herding sheep, and you are one step closer to having a really smooth working agency. Now, if you want to have more tips like this in future videos, subscribe to the Cloudways channel, hit that bell notification, because myself and my fellow Mavericks will be putting out more video content just like this to help you scale your digital agency. And we are excited. We are catching you in the next video.